everyone! Welcome back to Scenecraft. I'm Jessy, your host, and today we have an incredibly talented guest joining us. For all the filmmakers and visual storytellers out there, you're in for a treat. We're diving into the fascinating world of storyboarding. Please welcome Ethan Blake, a professional storyboarding artist who's worked on indie films, commercials, and even some animation projects. Ethan, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me, Jessy. I'm excited to be here talking about storyboarding. It's such a critical part of the filmmaking process.
Absolutely. Storyboarding often gets overlooked by new filmmakers, but it's really the backbone of visualizing a film before shooting. Let's start with the basics. For those unfamiliar, what exactly is storyboarding?
Storyboarding is like creating a visual script. It's essentially a series of illustrations or frames that map out the key scenes of a film, commercial, or any visual project. Think of it as the comic book version of your movie, where each frame represents a shot or sequence. It helps directors, cinematographers, and the entire crew see how the story will unfold visually before the cameras even start rolling.
That's a great way to describe it. Now, when you're creating a storyboard, what's the first step? Do you go straight into sketching, or is there a planning process involved?
There's definitely planning before sketching. It usually starts with the script. I'll read it thoroughly, sometimes multiple times, to really understand the tone, pacing, and emotional beats of the story. Then I'll have a discussion with the director to understand their vision, what kind of camera angles they're imagining, the mood they want to evoke in specific scenes, any particular visual elements they want highlighted. Only after that do I start sketching rough thumbnails of each shot.
That collaboration with the director sounds crucial. How much detail do you usually include in your sketches? Are they super polished or more rough to leave room for interpretation?
It really depends on the project and the director's preference. Some directors want very detailed boards, especially for complex action scenes where every movement and angle needs to be planned out. Other times, rough sketches are fine, especially for simpler scenes. The important thing is clarity, making sure that the shot size, camera angle, and main action are clearly conveyed. It's not about the artistic perfection of the drawings, but about communicating the visual flow.
I like that. It's more about communication than perfection. Could you give us an example of a scene where storyboarding played a huge role in shaping the final product?
Absolutely. I worked on an indie film where the director wanted this intricate chase scene through a marketplace. The location was tight, the shots were complicated, and we had to manage a lot of moving parts. Through storyboarding, we were able to map out each camera angle and shot composition in detail. We planned everything from wide establishing shots to close-ups and quick cuts. On the day of the shoot, because the storyboard was so clear, the crew knew exactly where to place the cameras and how to move the actors. It saved a ton of time and it prevented chaos.
That sounds like a lifesaver on set. So for aspiring filmmakers or writers, what advice would you give when thinking about storyboarding their own projects?
Start simple. You don't need to be an amazing artist to storyboard. Stick figures and basic shapes work as long as they convey what's happening in the scene. Focus on the composition, where the camera will be, where the characters are positioned, and what the viewer should be focusing on. And of course, always collaborate closely with your director or cinematographer if you're not the one filming. It's all about turning the vision into something practical for the shoot.
Now, we're entering the exciting part where we ask some of the most frequently asked questions to our guest. The first one is, Ethan, what is your process of storyboarding?
Great question, Jessy. My process usually begins with reading the script a few times to really absorb the story and get a sense of the pacing and key moments. After that, I'll meet with the director or creative team to understand their vision. This is where we discuss things like the tone, shot compositions, and any special visual elements they want to highlight. Once I have that understanding, I start by creating rough thumbnails, tiny sketches that lay out the basic action and camera angles. From there, I move on to more detailed sketches, depending on the project's needs. These storyboards can range from simple, just capturing the essence of the scene, to detailed, especially if there are complicated action sequences or visual effects. I always focus on clarity, making sure the camera movements, character positions, and emotional beats of the scene are communicated clearly. And of course, it's a collaborative process, so I'm constantly refining based on feedback from the director or other team members.
Do you find that certain types of scenes require more detailed storyboards than others?
Absolutely. Action scenes or sequences with complex camera movements definitely require more detailed storyboards. For instance, a chase scene or a fight sequence involves a lot of moving parts. Characters, camera angles, and timing all have to sync up perfectly. Those are the moments where you really need to plan each shot in detail, so everyone on set knows exactly what's happening. On the other hand, simpler dialogue-driven scenes might not need as much detail in the boards. You might just sketch out the camera setups and where the characters are positioned, leaving more room for improvisation during shooting. But even with simpler scenes, it's still crucial to capture the emotional tone. For example, if the director wants a specific close-up to highlight a character's reaction, that needs to be clear in the storyboard.
That makes sense. It sounds like storyboarding not only helps the crew visualize complex shots, but also keeps everyone on the same page, especially in fast-paced situations. What's the most challenging part of storyboarding for you?
I'd say the most challenging part is balancing detail with efficiency. You want to make sure you're capturing everything the director needs while not getting bogged down in too much detail, especially if the production schedule is tight. There's a tendency to want to draw every little detail, but sometimes you have to step back and ask, does this clearly communicate the shot? The goal is to create a blueprint that the crew can follow, not necessarily a work of art. Another challenge is when the vision for a scene changes after you've already started storyboarding. It happens. Directors might have new ideas during pre-production, or the script might get adjusted, so you have to be flexible and adapt. You get used to revising things on the fly, but it definitely keeps you on your toes.
It sounds like adaptability is a key skill in your line of work. One last question from our FAQ section. What tools do you use when storyboarding? Are you old school with pen and paper, or do you prefer digital tools?
I've actually worked with both, and they each have their own advantages. I started out with traditional pen and paper, and there's something really freeing about the tactile experience of sketching by hand. It's great for brainstorming and quickly jotting down ideas, but these days I mostly work digitally. I use programs like Storyboard Pro and Photoshop, which are fantastic for making quick changes and keeping things organized. The flexibility of digital tools makes it easier to adjust a shot or move things around without having to start from scratch. Plus, you can easily share digital storyboards with the team, which is especially helpful when working remotely or collaborating with a large crew.
That's awesome, Ethan! It's amazing to hear how storyboarding has evolved with technology, but the creative fundamentals remain the same. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me, Jessy. It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, remember, whether you're sketching with a pencil or working on a tablet, storyboarding is all about bringing your vision to life before you even step on set. Keep planning, keep sketching, and stay creative. Until next time, happy filmmaking!